With salvaged wood, you can find all sorts of things.
Oh, there's bee stuff here too. That's 4 nails in this thing already.
There's another one over here.
I kind of feel like this log is a bit, it's got a bad attitude.
Part of the fun. I'm Griffon Ramsey. I'm a chainsaw artist in Austin, Texas. I've been carving for 9 years. Today I'm going to be turning this into this using these. I'm going to start carving by blocking out, which means removing the bulk of the material, the stuff I know isn't going to be there. As few cuts as possible and saving as much of that wood as I possibly can. And that's the big centerpiece where I'm going to want somebody to sit. I'm going to be doing the blocking out with the Steel MS 261, which is a heavier saw, and it has a standard guide bar on it, which means I need to be really careful so I don't get any kickback. I'm trying to keep the pieces that I'm removing as large as possible to be used for other carvings later to conserve the wood as much as possible.
Oh, there's bee stuff here too.
This is an eastern red cedar log. I found it in East Texas from a guy I met on Facebook. When he salvaged it, he found this giant beehive in the middle of it. It's really rare in Texas to find something this size, and it has a hollow center because usually eastern red cedar, when it gets this large, tends to go hollow in the middle. And so the shape of it seems like it'll lend itself well to being a chair.
So now I can see how far the hollowness goes down.
Now that the big chunk has come out and I can see my seat, it's time to start cleaning out the rot and finding the good material so I can know what I'm even working with.
All right, so I'd hit some metal.
You come take a look over here. You do not want to find metal with your chainsaw. It takes a chunk out of your chain usually, or maybe in multiple places on the chain, and sometimes it can ruin your chain.
It happens. For events and stuff, you'll have people with a metal detector go over the log beforehand. I didn't do that. That's one of the downsides, I guess, of salvage material, is that often it has like random issues. The rot is kind of random. I think it's going to be all about like cleaning out the wood and finding the good wood first and then determining the design based on that.
Do you know how fast the chain is moving around the bottom of a chainsaw?
I should know that, actually. I don't know. I'll Google it. How fast does a chain spin in a chainsaw? You can assume the chainsaw motor is turning at 12,000 RPM, 12,000 revolutions per minute. That's fast. 22 revolutions per second.
I'm just switching bar and chain. It's too hot to touch. Ouch. People ask me if I've ever hurt myself on the saw. The only thing I ever really do is burning myself, like when you try to do things like this when it's still hot. There's different chain styles for different things, but this is just a regular bar and chain that you can buy at the store.
One clear way to tell if your chain is dull, your sawdust gets really powdery. Anytime your tool is dull, you have to work a lot harder. And it's at least not like a knife where it's gonna slip and be more likely to cut you, but it's making my life harder to have a dull chain. And if your tools are sharp, you have more control and you're gonna save way more time by not having to fight the wood as much. Here's an upside of having a dull chain though. It's less likely to overgrab or be aggressive, and sometimes when you're doing some like really smooth areas or like sometimes some of the finishing work, I don't mind having a bit of a dull chain, less aggressive.
So I just put on a new chain, and of course, the first thing I do is hit metal. There's another one over here. That's 4 nails in this thing already. These two, there's one on the back that I found a minute ago over here. Looks like maybe it was a fence line, staples with wire in it. That's a major pain. It's like a whole wad of metal in here.
So I think I'm going to switch for a moment to the power gouge because it can kind of hollow out a lot of this rot. I can't really get in there with the saw safely without just using the tip, so I'm going to try to use the power gouge. The power gouge moves a lot of material too, so that'll save some time hollowing this out. The power gouge throws bigger chunks than sawdust because it has these little scoopers, and so they're like larger pieces of wood and they can kind of hurt when they're thrown, and they tend to throw right back up to your face. So I wear the face shield with the helmet combination when I'm using the power gouge. If I do it straight on, it makes these 2 gouges and 2 grooves, which if you're doing like a frantic texture is fine, but if you're trying to sculpt with it, it's a little bit better on like one edge.
think I can get in there with the carving bar a little bit easier. The heavier the saw, the more work the saw does, and then the lighter the saw, the more work you do.
Now that the rot is mostly gone, I can start shaping the good material into the chair. Carving bar is great for shaping, but it also creates a lot of interesting textures. I kind of use it for everything. I can rasp with it. Rasping is kind of when you like scratch the surface side to side, straight down. Similar to sanding, but in a way that's a lot rougher. It's a way to clear a lot of material and sort of just scratch it off. Scoring is when you make a cut but not all the way through. So essentially just creating a line. Because the carving bar tapers, if you just make your cut immediately all the way in, that base is going to be a lot more like a typical bar, which is going to make more like jagged, straight looking cuts. If you score and you keep going a little bit deeper at the same time, then you can use that tip, which is going to make a better curve for you, more like a jigsaw. I like switching to the lighter saws because by the time I'm ready to, my arms are tired, so it's a relief to have the lighter weight and you can go a little bit longer. It's more like free moving, it's light, I'm more connected to it in my body. The downside is that it's not as long of a bar, and so I'm a little bit limited to what I can reach. As I keep whittling the seat further down to just make sure it's even and then sort of account for what is going to be comfortable, I keep noticing that the arms then are too high. So I'm trying to get the arms down to what's comfortable, where the seat is going to be, and that is shifting as the bottom shifts.
You want to go as far as you can with every saw you're holding. When you think that you have finished with one saw, do one more tank of gas with it and push yourself a little further with it.
I use gas saws as well as electric and battery, but there's some situations where some work better than others. Gas is more powerful and faster for the most part, and since I'm working outside, I'm using gas. Although the batteries are getting better and better, and the battery saws now are getting really strong.
Based on the color, the organic flow of it, I think it'll look really good as flames. So just like sitting in a bunch of flames, like sitting in the middle of a campfire almost. So the next thing to do is to finish the areas that I've started clearing out that aren't totally cleared out. So these inclusions, either that came from rot or from the natural inclusions of the cedar, because cedar tends to grow in on itself. So I'll go in with the saw, clear those out even more, and then start to shape them into flames. So it'll be following the natural flow of the wood, but then giving it some assistance to make it sculpted into flames. And so actually it should look kind of cool at the end, because even just in the natural twists and turns of the wood itself, it already looks kind of flamey. Especially when poking through some of this lighter material, the combination of the blonde and the red, it's gonna look really nice, I think. This is the baby. It's the cutest chainsaw you've ever seen.
The Steel MS 150 with the 8-inch carving bar with the dime tip and the tiniest little chain you've ever seen. I use that for final detail stage. Today I'm using it to carve around the tips of the flames, especially, except when they're getting in too deep, then I have to use the longer bar. But at least for around those little delicate curves and sort of on the inside where one object meets the next, that little bit of line, that separation, that's what that thing is great for. Another good thing about Eastern red cedar is that when you're carving it, it doesn't tend to get too fuzzy. That's kind of nice because you don't have to do nearly as much drying and sanding later. I'm switching to the angle grinder and the die grinder to start smoothing out the areas I've already shaped with the chainsaw.
Chainsaw carvers tend to be more afraid of angle grinders than chainsaws. I've injured myself the most on these two tools, and they are pretty intense and aggressive, and they can be scary, and they don't look like it. Like the saw looks a lot more threatening. It's so close to your fingers, so you have to be really careful. I have one where if I let go, it stops. So you see it's still spinning for a while, so then a lot of damage can be done from when you let go.
There's a certain stage where you don't really want to go back to the chainsaw because it makes a huge mess throwing bar and chain oil all over the wood, and if you've already sanded, you have to go sand again. I I use the angle grinder for a lot of things. It's a really powerful tool and it makes a great sander, but really aggressive sander that you can also shape and sculpt with. It moves a lot of material and then the edge can be used to make perfect little lines. This really aggressive bit on the die grinder is great for clearing a lot of material, especially in those hard to reach places that it's hard to get with the saw. And it leaves a somewhat sanded finish at the end of it. It's really important that the inside is sanded because I want somebody who's sitting in there to feel comfortable. And I don't want them to be jabbed in the back. And as I'm sitting, I'm feeling areas that are bulging kind of weirdly and it makes me sit not quite centered. And so I'm smoothing as much as I can so then a person could sit there and feel symmetrical. Since the hole in the center of the log is still here at this level, and I don't want anyone to sit in a hole, I'm adding some Western red cedar planks I had around the shop to make a seat. And then I'm using the same planks to make a little side table. I'm happy with how this chair is turning out, but I think it needs a little bit of burning to bring out the shadows and to define those flames. So I'm gonna use my MAP gas torch. MAP gas burns hotter than propane, and so it gets into those cracks in between a little bit better.
The cedar, when I burn it, it smells like incense. I love it.
When using the torch, you have to be really careful not to catch things on fire. I have in the past actually lit myself on fire during a live carving show because I wasn't paying attention and I was burning and it lit some of the sawdust on my table on fire, but I had holes in my table from the chainsaw and so it fell down underneath and mixed probably with some gas and oil. And at some point somebody shouted and said, "Hey, you're on fire," and I looked down, my leg was, there's flames creeping up my leg and I had to like pull my angle grinder, everything out. Luckily somebody was there with a fire extinguisher and we're really quick with it.
This was sort of a discovery process as I was like taking out the metal and the rot and didn't really know what the outcome was going to be. Had a sort of an idea of where I was going, but it's changed a lot over the course of the journey and I don't know, I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's kind of metal. I think we took somewhere between 400 and 500 pounds probably off of the log. Though we haven't tried moving it yet, so we'll see. Alrighty, there you have it. One giant cedar log, 3 chainsaws, a couple of grinders, 12 hours, and now we have a throne of flames.